the family would all get together and be together. I don't know what to do. If I go over to Robyn and Kody's for...
Friends, it's me. Meerab and I warmly welcome you to Starspill USA, and today's story takes us straight into a place where whispers become verdicts, where silence weighs heavier than any gavel, and where the illusion of divine love collapses under the cold light of truth. The courtroom was silent, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that hums with memory, regrets, and unshed tears. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights flickered across the faces of those who had once shared dinners, dreams, and doctrine under one roof, now separated by sworn testimony and opposing counsel. The name Brown that once stood for family unity had become a symbol of fractured promises and quiet despair. Christine sat still, the echo of her own heartbeat loud in her ears as she stared at the wood grain of the witness stand. Every knot in the timber reminded her of years she had been told to hold her tongue, to obey, to smile for the camera when all she wanted was to scream. Across from her, Kody Brown's eyes darted, searching for sympathy, for recognition, for that invisible control he once had, but no one was left to submit to his charm. He had built a kingdom of obedience and called it faith. Now he sat in the ruins, wearing a suit that looked borrowed, as if righteousness could be tailored. The judge's voice broke through the stillness, announcing the case, State versus Kody Brown, a civil claim steeped in coercion, manipulation, and the abuse of power masquerading as leadership. It wasn't the law that frightened Kody. It was exposure. For the first time, his narrative wasn't being edited by producers or filtered through confessionals. It was being dissected under oath, where no amount of scripture could shift the facts. Janelle sat beside Christine, her hands clasped, veins taut with years of unspoken loyalty turned to disillusionment. Meri was 2 seats away, face pale, eyes heavy with a pain that had grown familiar. The kind that doesn't make you cry anymore because it's lived so long inside your bones. Robyn's chair was empty, the fourth corner of what had once been a square of faith and family. Her absence was its own testimony, her silence louder than Kody's defense. When Christine was sworn in, she didn't tremble. She didn't falter. She spoke like a woman who had already survived the worst. I married him in faith, not on paper, she said, her voice slicing through the air like truth breaking through fog. But faith without freedom is just fear in disguise. The room stiffened. Even the stenographer paused a fraction too long before her keys resumed tapping. Christine's words didn't just recount events, they resurrected ghosts. She spoke of years where love had conditions, where obedience was measured as virtue, where the rotation of nights between wives had been fair in theory, but cruel in practice. Then Robyn arrived, and fairness evaporated. The other wives became relics in their own homes, shadows beside their own dinner tables. Christine recalled the day Kody stopped visiting. The day she realized that her husband's affection was a currency she could no longer afford. He said she lacked spiritual obedience, as though devotion were a debt to be paid in silence. As she spoke, Kody's jaw clenched tighter. The smug smile he had once worn for TLC's cameras reduced to a nervous twitch. The judge warned him once, then twice, his patience thinning with every muttered interruption. Christine went on, her voice steady. He controlled everything, our money, our movements, even our emotions. If we questioned him, he said we were testing God. If we cried, he said we were weak in spirit. And when we stopped believing him, he said we were unworthy of eternal family. Her words fell like stones into the courtroom's still air, each one heavier than the last. Meri bowed her head. Janelle's eyes glistened but stayed dry. The tears were long gone, replaced by exhaustion that only years of quiet endurance could breed. Christine continued, he made us dependent, spiritually, emotionally, financially. We earned money, but it all went through him. When I asked for grocery money, I was lectured on faith. When I questioned decisions, I was accused of rebellion. She looked at the jury, 12 strangers who had never seen the inside of a polygamous home, but could feel the claustrophobia of it now. The invisible walls built from scripture and shame. Her attorney laid out the records, every transaction logged, every contribution signed by Christine, every withdrawal authorized by Kody. Over $200,000 funneled into what was supposed to be a family account. But it might as well have been a vault of control. Kody's lawyer objected, claiming emotional manipulation wasn't a matter for the court. But the judge's gaze silenced him. "We're not here to judge belief," Christine's lawyer said calmly, "but to expose the abuse of it." The gallery murmured, the tension thick as humidity before a storm. Kody leaned towards his attorney and whispered, "She's performing," but his voice cracked mid-sentence. Christine didn't look at him. She stared past him at the version of herself she had left behind. Sitting obediently on a couch in Flagstaff, smiling through televised family meetings, nodding at lectures disguised as love. Her lawyer brought her back to one date, October 15th, 2020. "What changed that night?" he asked. Christine hesitated only briefly before answering. "That was the night Robyn moved in. The night the rest of us disappeared." The courtroom air seemed to shiver. Even Meri looked up, her eyes finally meeting Christine's across the aisle. A flicker of understanding between women who had once shared a home, a husband, and a carefully curated lie. After that, Christine said softly, "He stopped coming home to me. He said he was quarantining, said he was ill, but the truth is, he just didn't want to be there anymore." Her lawyer pressed gently. "Did you ask him why?" Christine nodded. "He told me if I were more obedient, he'd feel spiritually attracted to me again." The word obedient hung in the air like smoke, choking everyone who breathed it. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. Kody's smirk faltered. Janelle exhaled slowly, as if finally releasing the air she'd been holding since the day she left. "He used scripture like a leash," Christine continued. "He told me if I ever spoke about what happened, he'd turn the world against me. He said he'd tell the press I was bitter, unstable, that I'd lost faith. He said the church would see me as spiritually broken." She paused, blinking against the burn behind her eyes. "And the worst part is, I almost believed him." Her lawyer's next question sliced deeper. "Were your children witnesses to this behavior?" Christine's voice cracked for the first time. "Yes, they saw everything. They saw the favoritism, the absences, the cancellations, the birthdays he forgot. They saw how everything revolved around one woman, one household. The courtroom was utterly still. The only sound was the faint ticking of an old wall clock, its rhythm almost mocking, as if counting down the years they had all lost. "Once," Christine said quietly, "my daughter asked me if Dad still loved us. I said yes. But I was lying." She looked up, eyes glistening but fierce. "Because I wasn't sure anymore." The lawyer's next question landed like a knife. "Did you still love him?" The room felt like it inhaled all at once. Christine took her time before answering. "I loved the man I married," she said finally. "I don't know who he became. Love doesn't disappear in a day. It fades when you stop being seen." Kody sat motionless, his expression caught between fury and fear. The man who once preached unity now looked small beneath the courtroom lights. Christine's lawyer pulled out documents, records of the family's Flagstaff relocation. "You contributed to this move, correct?" "Yes," Christine answered. "And how much control did you have over the money you contributed?" "None." "Who controlled it?" "Kody." The lawyer turned to the jury. He presented himself as the family's head, but what he really was the gatekeeper. Kody's attorney rose again, objecting to the insinuation of fraud. The judge allowed the line of questioning to continue. Christine took a deep breath. "He told us Flagstaff was for the family. He said God called us there. But it wasn't God. It was Robyn. She wanted to be closer to her son, and he tore up all our lives for her comfort." Her words didn't accuse. They revealed. "What happens," she asked softly, "when God becomes an excuse instead of a guide?" The question hung unanswered. The judge watched her carefully, perhaps aware that history was being rewritten before his bench. "And your children?" her lawyer asked. "They struggled," Christine replied. "They felt abandoned. One fell into depression. Another dropped out of school. They stopped waiting for him to come home." She turned her gaze toward Kody. "And I stopped believing he ever would." Her lawyer's final question was quiet. "When you asked him to come back, what did he say?" Christine's voice was barely above a whisper. He said, "You made your bed, Christine. Now lie in it." The gasp that rippled through the room was sharp, collective, and human. Janelle reached over, resting her hand gently over Christine's. For years, these women had been told to share one man. Now they were sharing something far more sacred: truth. The judge called for silence, but no one could erase the image of that sentence hanging like a curse between them. Kody shifted uncomfortably, and for the first time, fear, not fury, flashed in his eyes. Christine looked straight ahead, no longer the wife, no longer the believer, but the survivor. The courtroom wasn't just a place of law that day. It was a confessional, a reckoning, a burial ground for decades of pretense. Every word she spoke peeled back another layer of illusion until what remained was raw and human. Faith had been weaponized, love had been commodified, and womanhood had been suffocated under the weight of one man's ego. And yet, sitting there beneath the sterile courtroom lights, Christine reclaimed something sacred: her voice. When she finished, she didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She simply breathed, as if exhaling 20 years of silence. The judge adjourned for the day, but no one moved. Kody stayed seated, staring at the floor, perhaps for the first time seeing what he had built and what it had cost. Janelle and Meri walked out side by side, not as sister wives, but as women who had finally stepped out from under the same shadow. And Christine? She paused at the door, looked back once, not at the man who'd broken her, but at the courtroom that had witnessed her resurrection. Outside, the air was sharp, the sky heavy with late afternoon gray. Freedom, she realized, didn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it came quietly after the storm, when the truth had finally been spoken aloud. And friends, that's where this chapter of the Brown family's saga leaves us, in a place where faith and fear collided, and where the women who once knelt in obedience stood up in truth. Because sometimes the bravest act isn't leaving the man who hurt you. It's standing in the light and making him listen. The courtroom was tense enough to slice through the air. Every eye was on Christine as she held a folded note in her trembling hands. The prosecutor's voice cut the silence like a blade. "Christine, can you verify this note was sent from Robyn's account?" Her eyes darted across the page and her complexion turned ghostly pale. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of the moment. "Read it, please." The prosecutor unfolded the letter and began. "If you keep heading down this road, Christine, there will be repercussions. Kody is acting in the best interests of the family. If you go, don't expect the church or the children to come with you. You will lose everything. Consider eternity." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel hard enough to echo. "Order." He barked. Christine's composure shattered as she turned towards the bench. "She threatened me," Christine said, voice shaking. "And I believe Kody was behind it." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. "Sometimes," Christine whispered, tears blurring her eyes, "the most frightening kind of abuse comes wrapped in love, tied neatly with a prayer." She sank back into her seat, shoulders heaving, breath uneven. Meri sat frozen, her face drained of color, her fingers twitching in her lap. Beside her, Janelle looked like a volcano ready to erupt, restrained but quivering with heat just beneath the surface. And Kody looked smaller than anyone had ever seen him. Not smug, not defiant, just diminished. Like a man watching the empire he built on manipulation crumble, one testimony at a time. The judge finally adjourned for recess. Christine rose from the stand, and this time she didn't glance back. She didn't need his gaze, his approval, or his validation. For the first time, she had something far more powerful: her own voice. As she passed Kody's table, she leaned just close enough for him to hear her soft words. "You don't own me anymore." And with that, she walked out, lighter, freer, and unafraid. Moments later, Janelle stood. The quiet one. The stabilizer. The peacekeeper. Yet today, her stride was different. Steady, sure, and almost regal. The echo of her heels across the tile floor felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to reckoning. She had been preparing for this moment for years in silence, through countless nights spent poring over bills, hiding deception, fixing messes that Kody caused but never admitted to. She took her seat, raised her hand for the oath, and placed her palms on the table before her, not as a wife, but as a witness. Mrs. Brown, the attorney, began. How long were you in a spiritual union with Kody Brown? Nearly 27 years, she replied calmly. Were you ever legally wedded? No. That title belonged to Meri first and later, legally to Robyn. But spiritually, we were bonded. We raised children, shared homes, and combined finances. We built a life. When did things begin to change? The lawyer asked. Janelle's tone hardened slightly. When Kody began playing favorites. You see, favoritism doesn't destroy families overnight. It seeps in, poisoning slowly from within. The gallery leaned closer, silent, spellbound. I didn't ask for special treatment, she continued. I was the one handling the finances, paying taxes, managing the accounts, keeping us afloat. But when Robyn came, everything changed. Suddenly, there were secret meetings, missing funds, and hidden costs. When I'd ask questions, Kody would tell me I was overstepping, that I was presumptuous. Do you have proof of financial manipulation? The lawyer pressed. Janelle reached for a slim folder. Yes, she said. These are records of transfers from the family business accounts to Robyn's personal LLC. The label reads Household Spiritual Expense. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as she handed the papers to the clerk. The attorney raised a brow. And did the other wives receive similar payments? No, Janelle said, her voice cold. Only Robyn. Was there ever a time when Kody refused you access to family funds? Janelle inhaled sharply. Yes, during the pandemic. I needed money for food, heating, and utilities. He said finances were tight. 2 weeks later, Robyn bought a brand new SUV. Shock spread through the crowd like a wave. Christine bowed her head. Meri blinked rapidly, visibly shaken. And during that same time, the attorney continued. Did Kody live with Robyn full-time? Janelle nodded grimly. Yes, he told us he was quarantining there, but he didn't allow the rest of us, not even his children, to see him. He said he was protecting us. But when a father hides from his family, that's not protection. That's abandonment. The courtroom went still. Let's talk about property, the lawyer said. Coyote Pass. Janelle sighed deeply. In Las Vegas, we had independence. Separate homes, close enough to share dinners and laughter. But in Flagstaff, everything broke apart. He swore we'd build on Coyote Pass, each of us having a piece of the dream. He called it our legacy. But there were never deeds, no plans, just empty promises and a barren hill. The judge leaned forward. Did you contribute financially? Yes, Janelle said firmly. I spent nearly $80,000 of my own savings. Cleared land, hired surveyors, paid for the down payment. And he told me it was all in progress. Then I discovered the property was secretly refinanced in Robyn's name. The gallery erupted again. The judge demanded silence. I didn't want a divorce, Janelle continued. I didn't want the headlines. I begged him to fix it. But the man I loved disappeared, replaced by someone who saw us not as partners, but liabilities. Liabilities. The attorney repeated. He said he was tired of being the emotional mule for entitled women, that we didn't honor his masculine energy. That we weren't submissive enough. Christine flinched visibly at the words. Janelle, the lawyer asked carefully, were you ever physically threatened? Silence. No, she said quietly. Not physically, but emotionally, constantly. He used faith and fear as weapons. He told us we were sinning whenever we questioned him. Said Christine's spirit was corrupted because she refused to obey. How did that affect your children? Janelle's voice cracked. He told my son he was disobedient to God. Said I'd poisoned his heart. That was the last conversation they ever had. You could have heard a pin drop. Some wounds don't bleed, they echo. Last question, the lawyer said softly. Why now, Janelle? Why bring this forward after all these years? She straightened her spine, meeting the jury's eyes with a calm strength. Because I used to think endurance was faith, but I've realized it was just silence. The lawyer nodded and lifted a sealed envelope. This was received anonymously 2 days ago. Handwriting analysis confirms it's Kody's. Can you identify this? Janelle glanced at it, eyes wide. Yes, she breathed. The lawyer opened it. It reads, I did what I had to do. The law can't touch what's ordained by God. Let them try. I'll bury them with scripture if I must. Chaos erupted. The judge slammed his gavel again and again. Mr. Brown, sit down. But Kody stood, shouting, that's private. They're twisting my words. This isn't justice, it's a witch hunt. Christine rose. So did Janelle Meri. Didn't she broke down completely, sobbing into her hands? Why didn't I see it? She whispered. Kody turned on her, desperate. You always defended me, Meri. Don't turn on me now. She didn't reply. Then came the moment no one expected. The judge cleared his throat. By special request of the plaintiff's attorney, the court will hear another witness. The doors swung open. A young man stepped in trainer's hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder. The courtroom froze. It was Robyn Brown, Kody's estranged son. Kody's voice cracked into a whisper. His estranged son. Kody's voice cracked into a whisper. No. Christine covered her mouth in shock. Janelle grasped the rail for balance. Robyn walked to the stand, head held low but firm. I'm ready to testify, he said quietly. And in that instant, the courtroom didn't feel like a place of law. It felt like a graveyard. But the ghosts weren't buried. They sat there wearing wedding rings, their lives entwined with decades of doctrine and denial. And in the center of it all stood a son, one who hadn't spoken to his father in years, one who had walked away only after his father had already abandoned him. I was raised to believe my father was a man of God, Robyn said, steady and measured. But I see now he just wanted to be God in our home. Kody flinched as though struck. Janelle gasped softly. Christine's eyes glistened. Meri couldn't look up. What led to the breakdown between you and your father? The lawyer asked. It didn't happen overnight, Robyn said. It built up years of watching him favor one home, treat my mother like a tenant instead of a wife. But the final blow came during the pandemic. He laid down rules, no friends, no visits, no school, no family gatherings, said it was God's will. But it wasn't about safety. It was about control, and we all knew it. He lived with Robyn full-time. I remember watching him attend her kids' dance recitals while ignoring ours. He wasn't quarantining. He was choosing. Robyn's voice wavered, but his words didn't. You can quote scripture. You can hide behind faith, but love doesn't abandon its own. I used to pray for his approval. Now, I just pray for peace. The room was silent. Kody sank back into his seat, eyes darting across the faces of the women who had once called him husband, and the son who now stood as his greatest accuser. In that moment, the mask finally slipped. The man who claimed divine authority was nothing more than human, frail, flawed, and frightened. And as Robyn stepped down from the stand, the truth echoed louder than any gavel. Power built on fear will always collapse under truth. The courtroom still echoed with Robyn's trembling words. The air heavy with the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. He had sat at his father's table for years, believing in unity. But as he recounted how Kody had refused to attend his outdoor graduation for fear of contagion, only to be seen later shopping maskless beside Robyn, something in the room shifted irreversibly. The hypocrisy was no longer whispered, was illuminated. When Robyn spoke of his father's laughter, laughter without warmth, the kind that cut deeper than anger, every listener could sense the fracture of a son's last hope. He said I was rebellious. Robyn's voice faltered, that I was letting my mother poison my spirit. But the truth is he left me before I ever left him. His words lingered like smoke. Sometimes a father's silence hurts more than a scream. The attorney stepped forward gently. Did your father ever threaten you or your siblings emotionally or financially? Robyn nodded gravely. Always. There was always this unspoken threat that if we disobeyed, if we questioned, we'd be cut off spiritually, emotionally, financially. He made loyalty a currency and fear the price of love. The audience listened in breathless silence. "And what did that do to you, Garrison?" the lawyer asked softly. He took a slow breath. "It made me join the National Guard. I went looking for discipline, for guidance, for a father figure I couldn't find at home." The courtroom rippled with emotion. Janelle pressed her trembling fingers to her mouth. Christine's eyes glistened, and even the judge's expression softened. When asked if there was a moment that defined the breaking point, Garrison's answer came quietly but resolute. October 2020, he came to Mom's house furious, said she was turning us against him. "My little brother made a joke that we hadn't seen Dad in weeks and he exploded. Told him he didn't deserve his last name." You don't forget moments like that. When your father makes you feel disposable, you spend years wondering if you ever truly mattered. The room fell into solemn quiet. "Thank you, Garrison," the attorney whispered. The judge nodded. "The witness may step down." Garrison rose, his boots echoing on the tile as he passed Kody. For a fleeting instant, father and son's eyes met. Kody's mouth opened, but no words emerged. Garrison turned away, his silence louder than any argument, and walked out of the courtroom without a single glance behind him. The hush that followed felt heavier than grief itself. Broken only by a faint sob, Meri, her composure maintained. Through years of gaslighting and spiritual obedience, finally crumbled. She stood, shaking, her voice a storm breaking loose. "He said we'd be a family forever." Kody shifted uncomfortably, trying to silence her. "Meri, no." But she refused to be silenced. "Don't say my name like that, as if you didn't abandon me long before you had the courage to admit it. As if I was a mistake you are too cowardly to correct." The courtroom froze. Even the judge held his breath. Meri's words came like a tidal surge, cleansing decades of suppression. "You gave your love away like sweets, and I convinced myself that crumbs were devotion. That wasn't strength, that was weakness. My weakness." Kody snapped, voice dripping venom. "Sit down, Meri. You're humiliating yourself." But her humiliation was his undoing. Judge Hamilton's gaveling echoed sharply. "Mr. Brown, enough." But Kody had lost control, spitting his rage into the air like venom. "This court's a farce. You think you can try my family? You don't understand spiritual law." The bailiffs tensed, the room tense with fear and pity. Kody raved on, "You're killing our family. You're destroying everything God built." Until his words dissolved into incoherence. The judge's face hardened. "Mr. Brown, you are hereby held in contempt of court. Remove him at once." As Kody was dragged out, tie loosened, cheeks flushed. Still ranting about divine authority? Something intangible lifted from the room, a suffocating weight that had ruled too many hearts for too long. In the sudden stillness, the absence of his voice felt almost sacred. The judge leaned back, weary but resolute. "Court will reconvene tomorrow morning," he announced. For further consideration under Utah's family fraud and emotional coercion laws, Christine glanced at her attorney. "Criminal investigation," she whispered. The attorney nodded solemnly. "Yes, that's precisely what it means." Around them, silence settled like snowfall. Janelle rose, gently touching Meri's shoulder. "Come on," she murmured. But Meri shook her head, her eyes glassy. "No, I need to sit in it. I've lived too long inside his lies." Christine sat beside her, wordless, but her hand found Meri's 3 women. No longer wives, just survivors bound by shared scars. The following day dawned gray and cold. The final hearing. The room was packed with reporters, former church members, ex-friends, all waiting for judgment. Judge Hamilton entered, his gaze steady, his tone calm. Before the court delivers its decision, he said, "We will hear closing statements." Kody's seat sat empty. He had refused to return. His lawyer stood stiffly. "My client maintains this case is an emotional ambush. What occurred was a spiritual arrangement, not a legal one. There were no formal contracts, no legal marriages. This court should not conflate religious practice with misconduct." The words felt hollow, rehearsed. When Christine's lawyer rose, the air shifted again. She spoke with quiet conviction. "Your Honor, this case is not about religion. It is about power masquerading as faith. Kody Brown spoke in the language of God but acted in the service of control. These women were not wives in partnership, they were property. And when love becomes leverage, it ceases to be love at all. Her voice wavered with restrained passion. We are not asking you to criminalize belief. We are asking you to recognize harm. This was not a family, it was a pattern. One that deserves to be seen, named, and addressed. The room was still, hearts thundering quietly beneath the silence. The judge nodded gravely and adjourned for deliberation. Minutes felt like hours. When he finally returned, the verdict struck like quiet thunder. In Brown versus Brown ETHL, he read, "This court finds evidence of coercion, manipulation, and financial impropriety. While this is a civil case, I recommend the matter be referred to the district attorney under state fraud and domestic coercion statutes." Gasps filled the air. Furthermore, he continued, "Financial restitution shall be calculated and repaid to the plaintiffs from any shared assets, royalties or residuals tied to the family's media ventures effective immediately." Relief replaced victory. There was no applause, no triumph, just the sound of women exhaling after years of restraint. Christine closed her eyes. Meri pressed a trembling hand to her chest, and Janelle simply wept quietly into her palms. But before the gavel fell for the final time, the courtroom door creaked open. Robyn Brown entered, pale, silent, dressed in black. The crowd stirred in shock. Even the judge hesitated. "Mrs. Brown," she said gently, "I was informed you would not testify." Robyn's voice was soft, trembling, but deliberate. "I changed my mind." She turned first to Christine. "I blamed you for breaking us, for turning everyone away." Then to Janelle. "And I blamed you for not fighting harder." Her gaze drifted to Meri, "And you for still believing when no one else did." Finally, she looked toward the empty chair where Kody should have been. "But I never blamed him, because I couldn't. Because if I did, I'd have to admit I chose him over all of you, and over myself." A tear traced her cheek. "I let him use my company for transfers. I helped move money. I wrote some of the messages. I told the others to stay quiet because I thought loyalty was holiness." The courtroom fell into complete silence. "If there are consequences," she whispered to the judge, "I'll accept them. Because truth without accountability is just another lie." Christine stared at her, then slowly nodded. Not forgiveness, but recognition. When Robyn sat, the air felt lighter, as if something unseen had been released. Outside, reporters swarmed like vultures, headlines already forming. Kody Brown faces financial penalties after explosive trial. Judge recommends criminal review of Brown family finances. Wives reclaim power in landmark plural union case. But none of that mattered to the women who walked out into the cool daylight. Hand in hand, without titles, without fear, only truth. Christine turned to Meri and Janelle. "It's over," she said quietly. Meri shook her head. "No," she replied softly. "It's just beginning." Cameras flashed, questions shouted, but they no longer flinched. For the first time in decades, they owed the world nothing. They had already given the truth under oath with trembling but steady voices. And as they descended the courthouse steps, Christine paused, looked directly into the nearest camera lens, and said calmly, "Tell your story. Even if your voice shakes still. Because silence only protects those who hurt you." The crowd hushed. The moment wasn't just an ending, it was a rebirth. And in that silence, in the space between heartbreak and healing, 3 women found something sacred at last themselves.